T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back. It's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Power clear.
Well, hello and welcome to this late night live from the bullpen. I'm James Roy. As always, with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I would dare to call this the bullpen after dark, right? I mean, this is
Bullpen
like
after dark. Let's do it.
Definitely as late as it gets for us. I am good. I'd be better if the Astros that you are graciously repping would have got it done today. They have come off a series win, but they really can't afford to lose any more games. Today was a tough one. Really excited about the Dynamo, though. If we're talking about all the other sports teams, they got a number 9. His name is Ezequiel Ponce. And record club signing, huge Dynamo fan. So for them to get a striker, a goal scorer, which they sorely lack, is really exciting because the rest of their team is really, really good. To round it all out with all the other teams, the Rockets are going into draft mode, looking very excited to see what they do with the number 3 pick. From what I've read, they are looking to keep the pick and taking the best available player, which is always a great thing, as you noticed in our fantasy draft that we just got done. And that is the sports minute that is the Texans. Let's talk Texans.
Let's do it. To your point on Ponce, I'm going to figure out how to say that name properly at some point.
I think you're right.
Mr. Soccer himself, Glenn Davis, said the man lives in the box. I believe it was 38 games, 16 goals in 38 games or something like that this past season. Truly the striker that the Dynamo have been looking for. So I'm excited about that one. Before we really get into Texans talk, I just wanted to thank y'all. I usually mention this at the end of the episode. I thought I'd bring it up now, but there will be Texans jersey giveaways happening on Twitter and Instagram now, due to your efforts of buying stuff that was Texans geared through my Fanatics affiliate links. So we reached the goal on that. So stay tuned for details on that. It'll probably be next week. I'll put it out. We're going to do Twitter first and then Instagram later. So if you'd like to win one of the new Texans jerseys of your choosing, so long as it's available through Fanatics, I will get you that if you win the drawing. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. The Texans. I want to start. So I've been saying it probably the past 2 episodes now. We're in that dead zone of the off season. So what I want to start with is a bit of a fantasy chat. We finished up our Dynasty Texans fantasy draft. And as you may have guessed, CJ Stroud went number 1 overall. No, you didn't guess that, because who drafts CJ Stroud number 1 overall? I'm looking at you, the Raven sings. The Astros are making my life terrible. Sorry. Just saw that on the Instagram chat. That's wild. But I do agree with you. It's unfortunate to see. But I wanted to talk to you about who you think truly is a threat in Dynasty. Neither one of us really dipped very heavy into the Texans well. I picked up Xavier Hutchinson and Brevin Jordan on waivers after the draft because I was surprised no one else did. And, it's a deep taxi slot. There's no harm in doing that. But I just wanted to get your feel for like going through and maybe just rank like the top 5 Texans players that you think will make an impact in fantasy this season.
Well, I mean, the names it's more or less where they go, right? I mean, for the most part, it's going to be C.J. Stroud, Stefon Diggs, uh, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Joe Mixon. For me, this is going to sound like, I mean, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's not. I really, really feel like Joe Mixon is going to be like the guy when it's all said and done. Like he was the piece you needed out of the offense because it's no secret that D'Amico wants to run the football. It's no secret that Joe Mixon can catch the ball out of the backfield. And while I feel everyone else is going to eat equally, I think he gets the lion's share of the rush attempts. And that means he has the greatest potential to have, the higher ceiling, in my opinion. Obviously, CJ Stroud's probably going to, outpace them all because he's a quarterback. He touches the ball every time. But if I had to pick somebody not named CJ Stroud, for me, it's Joe Mixon.
I feel you on that one. And that's, I was mad with my draft position because that was going to be my mainly because as you know, since everyone in the group is a Texans fan, like the only player I saw that I was surprised how late he went was Dalton Schultz. I felt like he went way past his projected draft position, but every other Texan that you mentioned went like probably almost a round ahead of where they were supposed to go. But I like Joe Mixon a lot because in today's fantasy football landscape, I personally believe unless you have there's some draft positions in the first round that are unfortunate because you kind of have to take a running back. But if at all possible, you should be stacking wide receiver. And it goes against what I was taught when I first started playing fantasy football. But in a standard fantasy football league, even in a dynasty league, I feel like now you don't touch running back until the third round and you're good. Like it used to be due to the scarcity of starting level running backs, you had to fill that earlier. And there was drafts that I participated in like 10 years ago where a player like Antonio Brown didn't go number one overall. He was actually, I believe, the one who started the discussion on should we be taking wide receivers number one overall in fantasy drafts? It always used to be a running back. And so with that, it's all about finding value at running back. And I think Joe Mixon easily is the highest value pick you're going to get from the guys. It's obvious we're going to talk about like Stefon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell and CJ, and they have their place. But I think that in a non-Texans centric fantasy league, that Joe Mixon in like the 4th, 5th round is easily the steal of the draft. And that's like Nico Collins level in last year's draft of a steal, where you find your guy at that level. Now in a dynasty league, maybe not. I mean, it depends on how you view his age, but in a standard league, I'm all about it. I think that CJ in a super flex is easily like where he was taken in our dynasty league. I think that's a fitting spot for him. Now here's a question for you in regards to CJ. CJ was QB 10 last year. Now he did miss 2 games. Do you think that maybe people might be overhyping or overdrafting him due to his reputation relative to what he produced because of like injuries? Or do you think that you can project out what he would have done against other teams if he had stayed healthy and be like, okay, CJ's good and he should be a top 5 quarterback just based off what we know?
I think you bump his projections just based on the weapons he has now relative to what he had last season. Take nothing away from, Robert Woods or, Devin Singletary. But that's not, Joe Mixon. That's not, it's not the same caliber of player. So, and then you factor in that CJ has now had a year under his belt, a year in the system, a year to be able to make the mistakes. And I think now you take a guy who, everybody returns, offensive line, coordinator, that sort of thing. And you really don't have to worry about, feeling new players out. I mean, obviously, there is the new wide receiver in town. But I mean, for the most part, I think that's really simple pitch and catch type stuff with those guys. I just really think CJ is just going to elevate his game another level because he's going to have to. I think teams, we've talked about it. He's been out there very vocal. And I think that he understands that that's going to require a certain level that he's got to get to in his game to be able to justify the sort of the talk, you know what I mean? Backing it up. And I think the offense is going to be a well-oiled machine. I think with Bobby Slowick, you see a guy that wants to be really innovative, really creative. He's got a lot of weapons to do that now. Diggs, I saw in OCAs where he was, moved all over the field, in the backfield, all kinds of stuff like that. So I can only imagine some of the different formations and gadget plays that they're already working on that I believe will make CJ better.
I agree. And I think that, like, in that vein of gadget plays, like the versatility of, like, say a Ben Skoranek, who they could line up at full. If you line up Ben Skoranek and Joe Mixon in the backfield, you've got two literal wide receivers lined up in the backfield at running back and fullback. It's just going to be tough for defenses to guess what the Texans are even going to do with that. So my next question to you revolves around Stefon Diggs. Now, obviously, in the Dynasty League that we're in, and in Dynasty in general, Stefon Diggs' value takes a hit due to his age. So where he was drafted made sense to me in our Dynasty League. Even then, it was probably a little higher than I thought he was going to go. In a standard league, just PPR, we're just drafting this year. Do you think that Stefon Diggs gains significant value? Do you think he's drafted above a Nico Collins or Tank Dell in a standard PPR league?
It's weird when you say standard and PPR because
PPR used to be the standard for me.
I understand that.
Not non-PPR, but my bad.
The irony is that it used to be two different things. Like a standard league, there was no point per reception. For the people that don't play fantasy football, PPR stands for point per reception. And now it has become the new norm. Now
I don't want to see two teams not score any points.
And it used to be that way. The point scoring was totally different. And running backs had a premium because you didn't score next level points with a wide receiver the way that you do now. And then pass catching backs, it didn't matter because all I needed was yardage. So now you have this next level where if he's not a pass catching back, you don't want him. So, and to get back to your question, I think that wide receivers now, because the league has become so focused on pitching the rock all over the place. It's kind of different. There's tiers, right? And once you get past the first couple of tiers, they're all the same. And then you're just really playing the matchup game. And there's guys that I've seen that have done incredibly well with dynasty and season long or standard leagues, I guess is the way you're coining it, where they've just basically got that one stud, two studs, whatever, and that third wide receiver, you really just, all right, today this is a good matchup. I'm going to take this guy, and he's probably the wide receiver 3 for that team, but there's a chance he could go do something and focus, the rest of my team elsewhere. Diggs is a unique one because for me, I've always felt like he was going to come in and really command the respect as the veteran, the old head, but still in his prime, that would be quote unquote the dude that would get the lion's share of the work. The way you listen to him talk, he's saying all the right things. It makes me think that, he wants to be received as a team player so that maybe he doesn't do all the things that he did as the alpha in Buffalo, as the alpha in Minnesota. And he's just happy with everybody eating. Obviously winning will make that easier. I think if the Texans for some reason lose a couple games, then you might see him change his tune and go, look, feed me the rock. And that's really hard to project. So I think for the most part, you're where he was drafted or being drafted a little bit later makes a lot of sense. And you're really just taking him early if you're a homer, if you just really believe in Stefon Diggs, the person and the player, and you got his jersey in your closet.
Well, and I don't know. To me, I agree with you, right? All those points make sense this year, but I do think that a lot of people are discounting Stefon Diggs because he moved to Houston and because of his age. But I think that what people are overlooking is how he's progressed as a player throughout his career. So I pulled his stats up. just to throw some context to this. So through his first 5 years in Minnesota, he had over 100 receptions one time. His last 2 years in Minnesota, he had over 1,000 yards. The other ones, he was between 700 and 900 each time. Just focusing on his time in Buffalo, right? He arrives in Buffalo, 127 receptions and 1,500 yards. The next few years, 103, 108, 107 receptions and comparable yardage. He's never averaged less than 10 yards per reception in his entire career. But he also had at least 8 receiving touchdowns in every single season that he played. Now, the big factor that plays into this is, are Tank Dell and Nico Collins the kind of receivers that take a bite out of that production and make it like less, or is Stefon Diggs still going to produce at that level? I've seen a lot of Texans fans projecting him at like 65 or 70 receptions, which is, he had 63 in his last season in Minnesota, put up over 1,000 yards on that. So it's not unreasonable, but I do think he's still a high volume target. I think that early in his career he was playing deep ball. You can tell, like, looking at his numbers, he was the deep threat in Minnesota, and then he became the volume guy in Buffalo. Not that he wasn't a deep threat, but he just was getting the ball a lot more. So the question really becomes, is Tank Dell going to be eating into that? I think that Nico Collins, as many yards as he put up, is still like the deep threat guy. He can do the work down low, but he's got the big body, win the deep route kind of thing going on. So I do think that you factor that in. So I think that's what's affecting it, because even as early as last year, or as recently as last year, I was seeing Stefon Diggs go in the second round of fantasy drafts. So it's just hard for me to believe that he's fallen off that hard. Now, Burpin in Baseball is asking, why are we excited about Stefon Diggs? Put it in baseball terms for me. I don't know. Tell me if I'm out of line here. I'm going to let Tom handle this one, but I'm looking back to the move the Astros made very recently in signing Jose Abreu. I don't think it's the same thing. I think there's a difference in it because Diggs is not as old, but Diggs is coming off of a similar sort of production. Like Jose Abreu was producing at a high level as a hitter. He was the MVP in 2020. And then he came to, I'm not saying that this is going to mirror. I don't like making this comparison, but when you ask me that question and I try and put it in Houston baseball terms and I'm looking at recent history, I'm like, oh, well, people were, I don't want to be a revisionist history guy, but it felt like people were really excited for Abreu to come in, and then immediately he just failed to produce and people turned quickly. I don't know, Tom, I'm going to let you handle this one. You're the baseball expert here.
First off, please don't ever again put Jose Abreu and Stefon Diggs in the same sentence ever again.
Never
These
again.
are not the same guys. One was 36 and dust. One is 30, 31.
Yeah, he's younger, so that's why the comparison doesn't work.
Still well within the prime of his career. Yeah. I will use a player that went off tonight, and it was one of those players that very good, not great, very good. Teoscar Hernandez going to the Dodgers. For me,
okay, yeah.
I think that when you look at what he's doing on that team, it's he had a huge 3-run bomb tonight, and the guy has been balling out, and he balled out a little bit in Toronto. He balled out a little bit in Seattle, I believe. And when you look at a guy like that, and then you look at Diggs has never been superstar, but he's always been really, really good. And now he's coming to a team that's got a ton of good players like the Dodgers, and you're putting another good player with a bunch of other good players. And, CJ being the Shohei Ohtani-esque dude, I just see it all kind of working around like that. Bourbon Baseball, thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, and to contextualize the age thing, as a Texans fan, you have to look at Andre Johnson's career and look at his production. 9 years in, he's coming off of a season that he was injured in, and so it was only 492 yards. But in the 3 years that followed that season, that was the same season that Stefon Diggs just came off of, he put up 1,598 yards, 1,407 yards, and then a 936 yard season, all on pretty high volume receiving, 112, 109, and 85 receptions. So I mean, if we get that kind of production or anything close to that, an average of 1,000 yards a season for 3 years from Stefon Diggs, if he was to decide to re-sign, would be excellent. But I think Tom definitely gave a lot better comparison. I regret even saying those two people's names in the same sentence. So I'd like to publicly apologize to the whole Texans fan base, to the whole Astros fan base, to the whole city of Houston. That was not my finest moment, but
the baseball comments provided by James Roy do not reflect the Bullpen podcast. And if it is not football related, we will not,
Up next, let's talk about how much I love the GM that is Jeff Bagwell.
Uh-huh.
Oh no! Speaking of the Astros, briefly, we were talking before the show, and I made a comment to Tom since Bourbon and Baseball is here. I thought I'd bring this up. I said, imagine if Maldonado was catching for this Astros loss today, and how that would go down over social media. And he accused me of being a Maldi truther and liking Maldonado, and I'm like, no, I'm just saying. Thank God it was Corey Lee, because I'd rather have the discussion about if the Astros missed out by sending Corey Lee away than talk about whether or not Maldonado's God's gifts to defensive catching. So, I mean,
everybody
there you
wants
go. Was
to
that
do
solid
it.
analysis? Did I redeem myself with that one?
I'll let Bourbon and Baseball be the judge.
Oh my gosh. Bagwell's our Bill O'Brien. Don't do that to my legend. Dude, for the longest time, Jeff Bagwell is my favorite player. Like, until this recent era, like, Jeff Bagwell is my go-to. Bagwell and Biggio. And man, I can't. I know we're supposed to talk about the Texans right now, but I just need to talk about it. I need to get this off my chest. The slander around Jeff Bagwell in these recent years is just hard to watch for me, because to me, he was like, watching the 05 World Series, not a great memory, but like, watching the Astros turn to him when they needed a hit, when the game was basically, game 4 out of reach, maybe Bagwell will go up there and give a hit like that. I can't bring myself to talk bad about Jeff Bagwell. I don't like his involvement in front office operations, but man, it really depresses me to see this discourse in the Astros fan base. People that joined in 2017 talking about how bad Jeff Bagwell is for this team when they didn't get to see him dominate on the field. Anyway, that's my soapbox moment.
Well, I will say this. Much like I think Curiosity. I think I'm reading that right. Curiosity. That's a very valid, fair take, because the minute Bill O'Brien became GM, that's when things got off the rails. The minute Bagwell dipped his toe into the general manager well, that's when he got the slander. Now, I would invite all of y'all to go and listen to Bourbon and Baseball Astros Edition. It's a fantastic podcast centered around the Astros. It is rated R. You will get some cursing. You will get some humor. Yeah.
I'm trying to throw an R out there. I don't know how to make an R.
It's not a podcast for young adults. I'll be very honest. But we talked about it, and we talked about how Bagwell, is going to catch the smoke because he put his name on Jose Abreu. He endorsed it. He was in Jim Crane's ear. But, there was also a valid point made that, look, while he could have absolutely authorized, hey, this is a guy you need to go get, I don't think he was like at the end going, please don't cut him. He's my guy. If anything, I think Jeff Bagwell
was the narrative that frustrated me.
If anything, Jeff Bagwell was trying to save, what his team. I mean, he's an Astro guy through and through. And that was a $30 million check that Jim Crane just lit on fire to cut him. So I think Jeff Bagwell was trying to do
that
right.
Money to extend Tucker or Bregman.
Well, he can't use it now. He's already spent it. But
spent it.
He was trying to make the best of a bad situation. So I don't think he was like pining for Jose Abreu after he got him signed. So maybe let that go. Maybe Bags is like, look, from now on, hitting coach. That's it. I'll talk to guys at spring training. No mas.
I agree. I like the way Biggio is with the organization. He's occasionally there, he's an Astros legend, but I don't feel like I have to blame him for anything the Astros do in terms of front office operations. But Man, yeah, like I said, slandering my look how they massacred my boy. Like, what are we doing here?
Hey,
My
everybody as kids was doing the Jeff Bagwell stance. If you were,
with the 100%. First pick in backyard baseball, Jeff Bagwell. Come on, what are we doing? Easy. And then I try to get Biggio after him and Berkman. Get the killer bees going,
Yep.
But let's get back to the Texans. If you want your Astros baseball fix, hop on to the Bourbon and Baseball podcast, the Astros edition, where my trusty co-host and Susie give you all you need about the Stros. Not always positive, but it is always Stros. The comeback player of the year. There was recently news that came out. It felt like it was targeted at Joe Flacco. And trust me, I'm going to bring this around to the Texans. Let me have a second. The comeback player of the year was Joe Flacco. And a lot of people felt like the AP, who put out a statement today, basically saying it should factor in injury. And it's really targeted at a player who overcomes adversity to get back onto the field and not a player who just sucked and was at a dead point in their career and then had a resurgent year like a Joe Flacco. Felt like it was targeted at Joe Flacco, but this was a discussion that had been happening before when Geno Smith won it, is what was reported. And so with that, the Texans have the perfect candidate for comeback player of the year. Tank Dell literally could, honestly, based on the standard for it, John Mechie literally, if DeMar Hamlin didn't exist, or it didn't happen to DeMar, probably would have been comeback player of the year. I can't think of another player that overcame a similar level of adversity in terms of it coming back from injury. But I think that Tank Dell is probably the front runner just based off the new definition for the award. What are your thoughts on that? And additionally, Elite Takes on Twitter have put out that they need to put a most improved player award. Do you think that there'd be an added benefit to clarifying the difference between the two? Because it feels like the definition of comeback player of the year could also fit most improved player. So do you think the NFL could benefit from adding that award?
I absolutely do. There's another player that I'm trying to think of that just recently overcame cancer, and that was a linebacker, right?
There's a defensive end, I believe.
Defensive end.
From TCU.
I'm struggling with yes.
There
You want comeback player of the year? There's your guy right there.
Tank Dell was literally shot. I know it happened in the offseason, but he broke his leg, came back from that really quickly, got shot, and was down for like 3 weeks. And he's like 50 Cent and football. Like, I don't know, man. I think it's got to be. I think that I agree with you that Dylan Horton makes sense.
The person that's going to win it, in my opinion, is Nick Chubb.
Oh yeah,
Nick Chubb's going to win that award.
So with that understanding, the tiebreaker is production. You don't just come back; you have to come back at a high level. So, which one wins? I'll give you a scenario, right? We'll pit Tank Dell against Nick Chubb. Let's say Tank Dell, like 90 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns.
He's not catching 90 balls. Come on now.
Okay, 65 receptions.
There you go.
1,100 yards. I'm going to stick with 1,100 yards. I'm not changing that. And we'll go with 7 touchdowns.
That's fair.
And then we turn to Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, we won't even factor in his receiving. We can if you want to, but I'm just gonna look at him as a running back. Let's say he puts up 1,000-yard season.
He's winning the award.
You think 1,000-yard season? You don't even need to hear any of the rest of the stats.
He's winning the award.
Nick Chubb 1,000-yard season versus
the way he blew up his knee. He runs for 1,000 yards as a running back. Oh yeah, I can't see. Not to mention, I feel like he's already got the national cliche. You're not not the cliche. That's the wrong word. The national shine. Like Nick Chubb is a face. Where I think Tank will be there in like 2 years. I don't think that this is a knock on Tank. It's just if Nick Chubb runs for 1,000 yards and becomes the lead back in on a Cleveland team that should be good, their defense is going to be great. That team's really just going to be. They're going to go as far as Deshaun Watson doesn't stop them from going, because he's the only thing that he's the only thing in my opinion that can derail that team. That team got all the way to a playoff game with Joe Flacco and Ford, I think was the running back's name. So
What's my understanding? So Stefanski's an offensive minded head coach, right? So, man, I feel like I'm gonna piss a lot of people off here. I'm gonna proceed with this train of thought. I'm on a roll here with these, but we'll see what happens.
Horrible comparisons.
There are some people that would attribute Deshaun Watson's development and success in Houston to Bill O'Brien's offensive scheming and coaching. And even in a down year where the Texans didn't even win 5 games, they went 4-12. Deshaun Watson has the most passing yards in Texans history, led the league in passing. He is the only quarterback in Texans history to throw for at least an average of 300 yards per game, and to have a 70% completion rate after playing more than 8 games in a season. But this is not to praise Deshaun Watson. This is to say, do you think that it more falls on Stefanski to draw that out of Watson, or do you think that Watson is a great quarterback independent of the coach scheming around him? I don't want to say independent of Bill O'Brien, but if there's one thing that I don't want to say we can attribute it to Bill O'Brien, but I do, after having reviewed like Deshaun Watson's performance and how it developed, I feel like he got a lot of help from good offensive scheming. Because like you said, Bill O'Brien, to his credit, was a good coach when he was not GM. There's some people that'll say he was a great coach. I think that's a stretch. But he's as an offensive schemer, and with the talent that he had in Deshaun Watson, he produced, right? Do you think that maybe that's where the issue lies? That maybe Deshaun Watson is just not compatible with Cleveland's offensive scheme?
I don't think that at all. It'd be easy to say that if Deshaun Watson didn't light it up in college. His Dabo Swinney, his coach at Clemson, famously said, "This is Michael Jordan." So it wasn't like Deshaun Watson was this unknown guy that Bill O'Brien coached up and cultivated and mentored and trained and took a 6th-round pick and made him a stud. This was the 12th pick, 11th pick. I can't remember exactly what pick. Well, one of those. It was a 1st-round pick. I
believe it was 12.
Yeah, I thought so too. So, he was highly thought of. He could have been the first quarterback taken, and he had some weapons around him, and he produced. Now, I think in Cleveland, the biggest issue with him is when you take so much time off for his off the field stuff, and then try to come back. You have to get up to the speed of the game again. And I think that's just going to take him time. Now, the problem that he runs into is that he's no longer a young guy. He was a 4-year college guy. And,
Took a whole year off football. And then another one.
Exactly.
And then another one.
So you're talking about now, I think he's 29? I can't remember exactly. But he's no longer this young stud. And, oh, by the way, he's had both knees redone because he's blown out.
And a lot of his
knees.
game centers around his mobility. So
it's really about putting him in the best possible situation within the offense. Kind of like they talk about Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is a guy that, everybody feels is a system guy, but he's really good in that system. So if you can build enough around Deshaun, he's 28. September 14th is his birthday. So he'll be 29.
He'll be 29 this season.
Yeah. So, he should have already figured it out. Trying to catch up to the speed, it's going to be really tough. And I think before he got hurt, he showed flashes, but still there'd be times where he held onto the football too long. And for whatever reason, to Flacco's credit, he got that ball out quick, and the Texans saw it firsthand. And that's what made him successful. I mean, they've got weapons there that they can use. It's not like you're training, new young wide receiver, new young tight end, and Njoku's legit. So,
well, in defense of the Texans too, the first time that the Browns played the Texans, they played a team who I don't want to come across the wrong way, but the Texans pass rush for most of last season was really good, but it was in spurts. It was never the biggest problem they faced was consistency. It's one of the reasons the secondary struggled a lot, was that the pass rush could be great, but was never consistent enough to set up the Texans defense for success. It's why the secondary needed a massive improvement this offseason, and why I believe the secondary will make the jump regardless of how few or how many moves you believe that they made to improve. But Joe Flacco didn't face the best Texans pass rush, and that's why in the playoffs they were picking him off left and right, and he was having a bad game. Was that the Texans pass rush was fully healthy and was on it that day. So I think that, and we even saw that from Deshaun Watson the previous season when the Texans got the pass rush on him. He threw that pick to Petrie. And I mean, any quarterback under pressure is bound to make a mistake at some point. I mean, regardless of who you are. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think Deshaun Watson can, but I think that I don't want to say this is they're going to watch that. They're going to see that contract through. He's not like Russell Wilson type bad where they want to get out of it like that. Like they're going to continue to try and see what Deshaun Watson can do until he either absolutely sucks or, is out of his contract. But, looking at the comments, we have a question here. It says, what's going on, y'all? Do you think the Texans can sign Brandon Ayuk if they released Robert Woods? And they can't sign Ayuk. They could trade for him. He's under contract with the 49ers right now, unless they released him, which I mean, I can't imagine they would do. But to your point on Robert Woods, I don't see any movement on Robert Woods, at least until, I don't know, the third preseason game, maybe. I don't know. Like they just need to see that through and see what his fit is in the Texans wide receiver room before they make a decision on how to move from him. Do you have anything to say on that, Tom?
Before the Diggs move, I would have loved Brandon Ayuk. Everything screams, up and coming star. He would have been the perfect fit on this team. Can get vertical in a hurry. I mean, but can also run the intermediate route. So Brandon Ayuk is definitely going to be a good wide receiver for somebody not named the San Francisco 49ers, because I think it's clear already. And there's already been some stuff on social media where he's come out and said, the Niners don't want me back.
I think that's a leverage thing. I don't know if he's
still
he's trying to get more money.
But if the Niners view that as like, well, I'm not gonna be goaded into more money, well then they can trade him. And
yeah,
some team will give them, 3 firsts or something crazy for a Brandon Ayuk who's a stud.
Do you think now the big thing around that, which is a similar discussion I had when the Justin Jefferson trade rumors were flying around, is that if the Texans were to acquire Brandon Ayuk, it would have to be under the pretense that they'd be willing to sign him to the deal that he wants. The Texans paid Nico Collins somewhere around $23 million a year. Brandon Ayuk saw, oh wow, hey, Houston Stresson's in the chat. Hey, what's up? He's talking about your haircut, Tom. Ready
yeah.
That.
You can't let it grow out all the time. Sometimes you got to keep it clean.
He's got to keep that little part of the Air Force in him, just a little bit.
I tried to grow it out long. As soon as it touched my ears, it made me feel weird.
Get rid of it.
Cut it off.
Get rid of it.
Yes,
we are stressing as Astros fans. Shut down the league. Just turn it off. Turn it off and turn it back on next year.
Listen. Silver lining, though, that is the most animated I've seen Jose Altuve, I think, ever. And if that doesn't get this team fired up to go win tomorrow and into the future, nothing will. Although
I can't imagine,
the injuries are getting ridiculous. The no Jordan today, that's really tough. I know this isn't a baseball pod. Again, Bourbon and Baseball, come check us out. Yeah. But I think the Astros legit have about 2 to 2.5 weeks to get their stuff together or to start selling some stuff. And Dana Brown has been adamant he doesn't want to do it. So we'll see.
I agree with you. It's, as a must-win series, I think that almost every series coming up for the next several games
you're
is
good,
a must-win.
sir. No worries.
But Brandon Ayuk, the biggest concern is paying him. It's already been reported that he saw Amon-Ra St. Brown's number and said, I'm worth more than that. And that gets into the other part of it is that he's a very similar receiver to Nico Collins in terms of his build and his purpose, which is why I'm kind of glad the Texans went in a different direction from that perspective to get more diversity in their skill set in the receiving core. I obviously would not be. There's no way I could be mad about having Brandon Ayuk on the team, but it would definitely change the offensive scheme at least a little bit. And I don't know if the Texans are ready to pay 2 wide receivers that kind of money. And Ayuk would definitely be calling for more than what Nico got. So, but so that's my biggest hang up on that move.
They are paying 2 wide receivers that kind of money right now.
They're paying
Stefon Diggs is getting
right
that
now.
Kind of money. Yeah.
But I think his cap hit's like $6 million or something like that. It's like not a significant. Whereas like I don't know. I feel like when you go out and you sign, maybe you push Ayuk's numbers to the back and I don't know. He plays. See, that's what I was saying. He's not the same size like height wise, but he plays the same X type position, and so it's just kind of. I feel like Diggs is the perfect fit because while he plays wide receiver 1 level ball, his like fit throughout and his ability to like be all over the field is intriguing for sure. Yeah, sweet. Tom, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about Texans wise?
I do wonder for whatever what happens if say Diggs decides he wants to get money elsewhere. How do you replace that, or do you replace that? Do you replace it internally? Do you go out and try to sign somebody like Brandon Ayuk or trade for Brandon Ayuk, assuming they franchise him or whatever, and he becomes a free agent next year or something like that? Like, what makes more sense, to get somebody like Diggs, to get somebody like a bigger guy, to be on the opposite side of Nico? I mean, you got the speedster kind of in tank, right? So what do you replace Diggs with hypothetically?
I mean, hypothetically, if I had a time machine, let me break out the DeLorean real quick. I'll hop back in time. You go in the 3rd round, or maybe you keep a 4th round pick. I can't even remember where he went, but Javon Baker, I thought would have been a great guy to have sit in that wide receiver room and then be ready to go next season. I like his attitude, the fact that he's from Bama, played for Bama briefly and then went to UCF. Like, I think that was certainly something that was worth, or Keon Coleman would have been more costly draft capital wise, but like I liked the wide receiver class this past draft. I'll probably really like next year's wide receiver class, but the Texans will still have Nico Collins and Tank Dell under contract and can do as they please. I mean, I've spoken to it before. I think the ideal scenario is they're speaking on it. CJ, everyone has said Mechie. Look how much better Mechie looks this offseason. It's the most I've heard anyone talk about a wide receiver 5, which is where he slots right now, just behind Noah Brown in my mind. But it's the most I've heard a team talk about a wide receiver 5 in a very long time. So I think the solution very well could be on the roster. If Mechie shows up, I don't expect him to make a huge impact on the stat sheet, but the impact of playing in the same wide receiver room as a Diggs, Tank, and Nico, and getting back to form, because Mechie is another Alabama guy. He's got chemistry throughout the roster. I mean, I think that Will Anderson Jr. in one of the videos the social media team said that Mech was like one of his best friends. So like, I mean, he's a good locker room guy, and it would be incredibly beneficial in a lot of ways for the Texans to find their Stefon Diggs replacement in Mechie if Diggs leaves this offseason.
So let me ask you this. If you think, or if you feel that Mechie's the guy, and they've talked at length about Mechie, why would he slot behind Noah Brown? Because of the contract, or what?
Because Noah Brown outproduced him last year. Noah Brown was re-signed, and it's just like strength of schedule, right? We're looking at the way teams did last year, and we're going, wow, the Texans have a hard schedule. So right now, all we have to go on is what each Texans player did last year, which is why Tank Dell and Nico Collins are thought so highly of. It's why Stefon Diggs, through what he's done through the last 4 years, is easily, it's hard to pick which one that is going to be the most impactful in that receiver room. And then you go down the line and you go, what's the next receiver the Texans have in that room that made an impact last year? I don't know. There's a guy who had 250-yard receiving games back to back. That guy could probably be wide receiver 4. Will he be throughout the season? I think my projection is that at the start of the season, Noah Brown will slot there, and then it's just a matter of who gets injured first. Is it Noah Brown or is it John Mechie? And Noah Brown's going to be on the field a lot more, so it'll probably be Noah Brown. And then you just have to hope Mechie can stay healthy. Slotting in at wide receiver 4, he'll get plenty of run. He'll get a couple opportunities. We'll probably see the Crane because he's going to be scoring at least 1 touchdown next season. Called it here. Go ahead and take that to your sports book. Man, I've been accused. I mean, of being too interested in the discussion on John Mechie. I'll be the John Mechie fan club president if you want to crown me that. I mean, you're the Damian Pierce fan club president, so
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Miko Ryans take that spot for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. The coach is already like, yo, that guy is a Texan, and he's going to be perfect.
And I think so. Houston Stressens brings up a good point, which is that realistically, on a wide receiver depth chart, Noah Brown is slotting in as Tank Dell's backup, and Mechie with Diggs, which reinforces my thought process that they might like Mechie to learn from Diggs and eventually overtake, not this season, but like take that position next season.
And Bourbon and Baseball, the guy that I think you were thinking of is Tank Dell. He got hurt, broke his ankle, right? Ankle. And I believe it was his ankle. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe it was his leg. Yeah, that was Tank Dell. Now, John Mechie had cancer his rookie season in 2021. He was drafted in the same year as Davis Mills, Nico Collins. Right?
He was coming off of a blown knee, though.
Maybe that was 2022.
Yeah, second round 2022.
Yeah, 2022. Now I'm getting my years mixed up.
He blew his knee out in the championship game, and then
got cancer.
And then they found cancer doing checkups and stuff like that. So
like he was available last year and he played, but he was never really fully healthy. So I'm anxious to see what the Texans are going to get out of him with him being 100%, which is what has been confirmed by anyone who's been asked about John Mechie, is that he's looking like he's back to form. So and look at it this way, since I like to talk about how much wide receiver contracts are going to cost this team. John Mechie drafted in 2022, so 2026 he's looking at a contract, right? If he takes another year and learns behind Diggs this season, and in 2025 he has a good year, he's in the same situation as Nico, but lower on the depth chart. I don't think that breaks the bank to keep that around. Whereas if Mechie was expected to step up now and like suddenly was really, really good, the Texans are having to look into extending him way early. They're having to look into throwing a lot of money at him. We don't know if we're going to keep him around. I just think that situation of having the time to develop him, it's a similar slot to where the Packers are with Jordan Love. The difference is that quarterback is such a premium position that with one season of production, they're probably going to be forced to give Jordan Love like 56, 57 mil APY. They're probably going to have to break the bank to bring him back after one good season. So I don't know.
I think that it's going to be something a little different. I think that if Mechie comes full circle, right, and he rounds into form, when he becomes a free agent, people are going to see him in this offense, and somebody's going to offer him a big contract. I mean, the same way Tank Dell's going to have to get paid. You know, like these guys aren't going to sit here and catch all these balls from CJ Stroud, and nobody's going to offer them any money to go, hey, you're balling over there, but come be our number one instead of being their 2 or 3.
It's just for me, if there's one player I can see on the Texans roster that's like I don't want to say the Altuve type, but I think that's what I'm going for. The guy who's like going to be on the team forever. The team is going to give him the money. He's going to take the team friendly deal, and he's going to keep playing with the team at least until CJ Stroud leaves. Is Tank Dell. Like I feel like Tank Dell is the guy he's came out to Houston, fell in love with the city, playing in college, had CJ make a call, get him on the team, and now unless there's a massive falling out, a massive changing of the guard in this Texans front office, CJ decides he doesn't want to be here. I think CJ and Tank are a package deal. And I think the bigger concern we'll have is whether or not at the end of this extension they just gave Nico Collins, if they're going to be able to keep him around. So I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I thought that Springer was a I'm not going to go anywhere. I thought that
Okay. All
Correa
right.
was a I'm not going to go anywhere. And in the end,
That's right.
those guys won, and then they went on and got the big money. Bregman, same thing. Bregman, for all intents and purposes, is probably going to go chase that dollar. Tank Dell, if they win, I don't know if he's going to have the same feeling if somebody goes and breaks the bank to sign him. So, I mean, I could be wrong. Football is just a different animal. I think the only guy that you can say that is the Altuve type for me is going to be C.J. Stroud, and it's because they're not going to let him leave. He's so much the perfect role model, the perfect representative. I mean, he's your quarterback. It's too easy, those comparisons. I think C.J. Stroud retires a Texan, and if he doesn't, we riot.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is tough. I think on a non-football note, I think that Bregman's almost playing himself into being an Astro for life with how little he's going to command on the market based on the season.
I agree to an extent because I still believe there is a team out there that's going to have tons of money that's going to go, you know what? We need a culture guy. Somebody say, I want a ring. Here's how you do it. And they'll offer it to him. The same way the Twins went and offered Correa money. Just for example. Minnesota brought Correa in for no other reason. And that's why they went on the short-term deal. Like,
Because of his health, yeah.
Well, exactly. But they were like, we need World Series experience, talent, guys that have been through those wars. Bregman's going to get that from somebody. If the Astros want to get to there, I think there's a scenario where he's still an Astro. But when you talk about Tucker needing probably, I don't even want to talk about the numbers that Tucker's going to need because he's playing himself
Tucker's
up.
the priority easy though.
Yeah. So it's going to be really tough.
100%. I think we have time for one more question from the chat. So we have someone asking, do you think that the Texans can sign Ryan Tannehill to be the backup? There's a lot of words here. Do you think that Tannehill could be signed by the Texans to play backup to C.J. Stroud if they were to move on from Davis Mills?
Absolutely. I mean, there's going to be tons of people that are going to want to be in that quarterback room with C.J. Stroud just because they know I'm going to go collect the check to be clipboard Jesus. Hold the clipboard, have the little earpiece in, chew
and
bubble
don't worry,
gum.
Tannehill, you're not going to have to mentor CJ.
Yeah. You're just going to be back there chilling. But I think Davis Mills, if he's smart, he's going to say, nah, I will hold this clipboard as long as y'all let me. I love it here. I know the offense. Me and Bobby Sloak, we go back. Let's just keep it. There's no reason. In the same vein that you see Case Keenum doing it. Why would he leave? I mean, there's no reason to go anywhere. So
the backup quarterback's a great job. Now here, I'll reframe the question. Which quarterback do you believe would be the better option to be the Texans' backup quarterback this season?
It's got to be Davis Mills because he's been in the system. Because all of the verbiage, those they have all the practices, all the OTAs throwing. We talked about Mechie. I can't tell you how many different clips I saw Mills to Mechie in OTAs. So for some reason, God forbid, something happened to C.J. Stroud, I think Mills could be a fine stopgap for a week or two if he had to. And I don't know that anybody else could come in and be a better replacement at this point. I think if they were going to do that, they would have done it 6 weeks ago.
They would have done it already, yeah. I mean, I see it, and personally, right, like I hear people throw around Tannehill's name, and just from looking at like him having what he did in Tennessee, and how he's been a high-level starter in this league for the past couple seasons, you think to yourself, he could come in and he could be that guy. But I agree with your point that Davis Mills has been in the system. I think it's a little concerning that the Texans didn't trust Mills to go in and be the starter in CJ's absence late in the season. I understood the move from, the perspective of a team that's watched and wants to, they're still in the playoff hunt. They want to give themselves the best chance. And that week at practice, they decided that Case Keenum was the guy who gave them that. But so from that perspective, I'm like, maybe they should sign Ryan Tannehill and then, maybe trade Mills and get what they can from him. But I do agree with your point that his experience in the system, I don't see. I mean, he's on a rookie contract. It makes sense to hang on to that as long as you can. All you do by bringing in Tannehill is have two backup quarterbacks that are veteran guys instead of like the young. If this guy comes in and starts, he could probably raise his value and get traded. Guy versus like your veteran presence, your guy who's like the leader guy. I don't know.
The thing with that Case Keenum game, and I don't think enough people realize it, right, is that before Davis Mills before he was drafted, I think he only had something like 16 games in college or something like that. It was it was one season. So then you take another season where, basically he's just thrown to the wolves. So it's asking a lot to try to like keep his head on straight in a game that they needed, to try to make a playoff run. And I think they just went with the veteran presence. I don't think that was a knock on Davis Mills other than, needing to be able to get some more time, in the system with I guess a better foundation. And I think I lost my co-host. He is frozen. Does anybody else see him? Is he moving? Anybody? Stressins, you got him? Is he locked up? Am I the one that's locked up? Hello? Anybody in the chat? Hey, so it's not me. Yeah, I don't think they've lost faith in Davis Mills. I think they just know what he is. They know he is still a very young guy. He just hasn't had the reps, hasn't had the time. I think they rushed him through college too much. And for me, the job, there he is in the dark.
My power's out, but I'm using my my Wi-Fi was the thing, it dropped out. But I guess we finish the thought and then bring it to a close because I only have so much battery life.
Okay. Thank you, Bourbon and Baseball. Thanks, Tristan.
But what were you saying? Sorry.
Just that they're trying to do right by Davis Mills and trying to give him the time to be groomed. Like he had so little time in college and then his first season, you really got to throw that out, so now it's easier to take a guy like Case and go, okay, you've been on some playoff teams, you've been around some veterans. So I think that's why they went there, but I don't think they've lost faith in Davis Mills.
100%. I agree. I don't think that like the backup quarterback conversation is kind of, to me, like the wide receiver 5 conversation. It's like the Texans have just gotten to a point where they're good enough that we can just talk about the depth instead of talking about what we need to do to fix the starters. So it's a good place to be. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry for the technical difficulties with the power outage. If you're not watching the video and you're listening the next day, I am in the dark right now. But so with that, like I said at the beginning of the pod, jersey giveaways. Make sure you're following me. We're going to do giveaway on Instagram and Twitter because of you guys using my affiliate, Fanatics affiliate links. Oh my gosh. To get the jerseys. Look, James has elite mental toughness and perseverance right now. I'm like it's like you're scouting me to be on the Texans right now. Thanks. But
over here doing this pod by candlelight.
Dude, I was surprised it was still running. I was like, I'm gonna try and connect to my hotspot and pop back out, and I saw you're still talking, and I was like, oh, it's still going. But I have been James Roy, and you can find me at M1 Texans fan or James Roy NFL, depends on the forum. Tom is at TCTom1 on Instagram and at Third Coast Tom on Twitter, so you can find him there. And there's some big things coming down the pipeline from my end. I've been picked up for something. I'm not going to talk about it much right now, but be on the lookout. It's going to have giveaways. It's going to have football. It's going to have Texans. So you should make sure you're tuned in so you can get in on that. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans.